Hello to everybody joining me. I'm Erin, and welcome to the Virtual Education Intervention Podcast. The name should give it away, but I'm here to educate, encourage, and entertain families and teachers who live and work with neurodivergent individuals. And yep, you guessed it, my primary location for education is virtual. Sometimes we all just need a little more community, and we benefit from having people in our lives who understand how we live, how we work, and what our minds are consumed with daily. We need support and encouragement within that space. If you're here, welcome to our community. Welcome back to the Virtual Education Intervention Podcast. I'm so glad you're joining us for this episode as we wrap up our series on executive function skills. A quick refresher, over the last few weeks or even months, we've been doing a deep dive into specific executive function skills. If you don't yet know, executive function skills are what we consider the CEO of the brain, and they live in our prefrontal cortex. These are skills that help us both in life and in school and in work. They help us manage time, pay attention, plan and organize, remember multi-step directions, sometimes even juggle multiple tasks. In other episodes, we've done these deep dives into skills such as planning and organization, emotional regulation, impulse control, working memory, and metacognition. All of those necessary skills that we use to help us do those things like pay attention, remember instructions, etc. If you haven't already, I would highly recommend you go back and check out those other episodes. Today, we're going to wrap up our series on executive function skills by diving into 5 additional skills. We're going to take a look at what they are, why they matter, and how to support them now in the short term and in the future through long-term support. These skills often overlap. Much like the other executive function skills we've discussed, there's often an overlap in these skill set. That also means that there's often an overlap in the deficits that we see in these skills. I mentioned this in our last episode, but it bears repeating. These are skills, and we are taking a look at the deficits in these gaps, not behavior problems. Now, I'm not saying that poor behavior or negative choices should not be addressed or even disciplined, but my point here is that I want us to look at executive function gaps or executive dysfunction, not as behavior problems, but as deficit in a skill set that is impacting our child's understanding or approach to what they're doing. Now, in this episode, you're going to walk away with action steps, ideas, and long-term goals to support growth in these executive function skills. That includes understanding a definition of what each executive function skill is, why it's challenging for our neurodiverse learners, short-term strategies, long-term strategies, and an example of a next step goal within that skill set. So let's dive into the first of these 5 executive function skills. This next skill, task initiation, can be a massive challenge for many individuals with neurodiversity. Specifically, I see this challenge in individuals with ADHD and sometimes with autism. This idea of task initiation can be debilitating. Now, our students are not going, I cannot initiate this next task. They're not robots. But it's the challenge of getting started, the ability to begin a task without excessive procrastination. It includes overcoming some mental hurdles and getting started. Now, I will often hear my students say, oh, I'm just really bad at XYZ, so I don't start. And they're internalizing a very negative understanding of their challenge with task initiation. Now, I can read into this and I can look at my student and say, you're not just, quote, really bad at this thing. Rather, you are looking at a complete whole project or task without the ability to break it down, and it's overwhelming. For example, I have a middle school student who has said to me in the past, I'm really bad at geography, and so it just takes me a long time to get started, and then I rush to get it done. And when she holds up her work packet, it's like 20 pages thick. So for an individual with ADHD who struggles to break down tasks, she's looking at a massive project and feeling completely overwhelmed. And that overwhelm is leading to procrastination. She doesn't know how to get started because she's not thinking, I just need to take it one page at a time. She's thinking, I have to complete this massive project and I have to complete it all at once or right now. And that's very overwhelming. So think of it that way instead of, man, why can't they just get started and do one thing at a time and you're snapping your fingers? Think of it as they are mentally overwhelmed. Even if they would not put those words to it, their brain is overwhelmed with the idea of starting and completing a big project. Executive function often feels like a can't, not a won't. So what outsiders, what educators, what other people might look at and say, well, they won't get started. Their brain says, I can't get started. It is overwhelmed. This can also tie into things like anxiety, perfectionism. It can really be impacted if they have unclear expectations. These things can really stall our kids out. So how can we help with task initiation? If we see our students struggling with this, there are several immediate short-term strategies we can use. Some of these short-term strategies might include what we call smarter steps or breaking down tasks. So instead of saying, write your paper, which is very big picture in general, you may say, open up your document. And then once they've done that, write your title. Okay, once they've done that, now let's complete the outline. Okay, let's put your introduction sentence in. So they may need help with that initial start to the project, working through those step-by-step processes. Now they may need that just to get started. They might just kind of need that little boost to get into the project and then they're fine to complete the task. Or they may need you to work through a few of these individual step-by-step processes towards completion. And either way, it's okay because they are still completing the task. But what this does require is an awareness around the educators. So if you have an individual with ADHD in a general education classroom, that general education teacher is going to need to be aware of this student need, this accommodation that this student with ADHD is going to benefit from. In addition, if you have aides in the classroom or any kind of pull-out support that the student's accessing, then those staff would need to be aware as well. If you're at home, instead of saying, go clean your room, you may start with, go up to your bedroom, open up your closet, choose one thing to organize. So for example, I have little kids and in their bedroom, we have like a closet organizer and they have bins and every bin has, an organized a type of toy. So you've got magnet tiles in one, you've got Legos in one, you've got Barbies in one, or whatever your kids like to play with. So I might say, okay, go up to your room, open your closet, find the box that says magnet tiles. Great, now put all of the magnet tiles in that box. And that's where we're starting, because if I say go clean your room, that's an entirely overwhelming mess, and they're not going to be able to start without more specific directions. But if I can start with that, once they're done with those magnet tiles, guess what? Then it's as simple as saying, okay, now do your Barbies. And just giving them one individual task at a time. For older kids, you can kind of expound on that and what they need to do, and you're making it age appropriate, but the idea is breaking down the task so that starting feels less overwhelming in general. Another short-term strategy you might do here is using a countdown. We're going to start in 5 minutes, or we're going to start in 2 minutes. Some kind of verbal and visual cue for when they can expect to begin the work. Structure, checklists, visuals, even scripting it out and having your student work through that can be really helpful. Anything that's going to reduce the overwhelm of the overall big picture that they think they have to complete immediately can be helpful. Now, that's in the short term, in the moment, and those can be really, really helpful action items to do to help your student start a task that they need to start immediately. But we also want to be working towards long-term independence in this skill set, much like our other executive function skills. We want to be building routines around predictable transitions. So something like, I know we always leave for school at 7:30. So that means I need to get my shoes on at 7:25. For a long time in my head, I thought, okay, I have to leave at 7:30. So I'm going to tell the kids we've got to walk out the door and get our shoes on at 7:30. But the reality was that we didn't leave until 7:45 because shoes take time. Car seats take time. That whole process takes time. So I had to factor in additional time. Build those routines and build them in predictable ways. We want to practice initiation with low stress tasks before we have harder ones, or I would call them bigger ones, overwhelming ones. The stress is not in completing a task. The stress is in completing a big picture. They feel as though they have to accomplish everything all at once, and that's overwhelming. So what I usually say is you can't jump from the bottom of a staircase to the top of the staircase in one big step or one jump. You have to take it one stair step at a time, and our kids need help figuring out what those stair steps are. Now, practicing this skill with lower stress tasks before you're expecting them to do it with something that's kind of got this big grand picture is really helpful. So this might be something like starting a load of laundry, or you're asking them to wipe down the counter. So just like 1 or 2 step tasks, keep that in mind as you're just practicing that skill. So like on Saturday and it's chore day, maybe you're making their expectation to wipe down the counters. You're doing that and you're giving them a 1-step task that's low stress, right? Or at least that would be low stress for me. Maybe there's another thing that they would do that would be low stress for them. You want to tailor it to meet your children where they're at. Start by practicing with smaller picture, low stress tasks before building up to those harder ones over time. The last long-term strategy for task initiation is one we've talked about quite a bit for all of these executive function skills, and that's modeling. In this example, we might want to teach self-talk. How do we model processing through task initiation? We might say, okay, I'm going to start by wiping the counter. Because crumbs fell on the floor when I wiped the counter, next I'm going to sweep the floor. I may also say, okay, I'm going to do this task for 2 minutes before I move on to the next thing. You're modeling that for your kids, which is a great example, and over time they're going to start to do that themselves. Remember, our kids sometimes, our neurodivergent children sometimes struggle with that time management. We call it time blindness. And in our next executive function skill review, we're going to talk about that. But modeling the language of 2 minutes and even setting a visual timer can be really helpful with our kids with neurodivergence to really visualize that time component that's so important. But including that in our modeled self-talk and then walking our children through that can be really helpful. Now, I mentioned earlier that we're going to be talking about goal ideas associated with each of these executive function skills. Now, I'm not talking about an IEP goal per se, although you can have IEP goals surrounding executive function skills. But I wanted to focus these goals specific to each executive function skill we're reviewing. So when we're talking about task initiation, a goal idea might be, I can start my math homework within 5 minutes of sitting down 3 out of 5 days this week. Okay, you're giving them specific expectation, a specific goal to work towards, and it's reasonable, it's manageable. Okay, 5 minutes, or maybe for your child that's 3 minutes or 10 minutes. You're going to tailor this to meet your child's needs. I like to call this like that sweet spot where I'm going to pull you forward a little bit, like maybe you can do 4 minutes. Okay, I'm going to expect 5, but 6 may be too much. Okay, so we're finding that sweet spot where I'm still expecting from you a little bit more than you've shown so far, but I'm not expecting the world from you. I'm still making this very reasonable. I don't want it to be an overwhelming thing for you because the goal is to reduce that overwhelm. so that we can do this task. All right, let's do our next deep dive into time management, which is the next executive function skill we're going to take a quick look at. The definition of time management, it should be pretty self-explanatory, but we'll walk through it. It's the ability to estimate how long tasks will take, plan accordingly, and stay within time limits. Now, I would also add to that, it's not just estimating how long tasks will take, but it's having this understanding of how long each amount of time is. How long is a minute? How long are 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, a day, half a day, 5 days? Having this idea and this sense of what I can accomplish within a certain amount of time is really important. Neurodivergent individuals often experience what we call time blindness. They don't understand how much time certain activities take. And sometimes they can get caught up in what we call a hyper focus. And so this often happens with individuals with ADHD. We tend to think that there's a lack of attention, when the reality with ADHD is that it's not a lack of attention, it's a dysregulated ability to attend. So if they have a high interest area, they might lose themselves in their hyper focus. So they could go for 12 hours being extremely hyper focused on building a model train because that's their area of interest. But when it comes to cooking dinner and cleaning their bathroom and making their bed, like that's not going to happen because they have zero interest in those things, right? And so it's this dysregulated attention piece, and that can relate to time blindness. If you're in hyper focus, that can be extremely difficult to break. There have even been situations where people have kind of awoken from that hyper focus, so to speak, and their house is on fire. And they didn't even realize it because they were so focused on the activity that they were doing. So this idea of time blindness is sort of binary. It has two categories: now and not now. So it's very black and white. Is something happening now? Am I experiencing it now in the moment? Or am I not experiencing it? And if I'm not experiencing, then it's out of sight, out of mind. So let's talk about some short-term strategies to support time blindness. Now, this is one that is going to need some active intervention. So yes, we're working on long-term strategies and we're going to get to that. But in the meantime, before your neurodivergent student or child is independent with these strategies, they may need some external support. So things like clocks, visual timers. We all walk around with a cell phone. So even middle schoolers, sometimes and high schoolers, setting timers on our phone. I use timers all the time. Every night before I go to bed, I set my timers for the next day, marking meetings, classes, appointments I have to get to, things like that, things for my kids. It's all marked on there with like 100 timers that I click. So anything like that. Now, we want to teach our children to use these independently, but until they do, remember this takes time and repetition, we may need to be the ones to say, hey, let's set your timer together. Not even just go set your timer, right? Because then we're getting into task initiation. Let's build up to that. Let's sit down after dinner and set your timers for tomorrow together. And then eventually that becomes a routine, that becomes a habit, and now it's simply, hey, go set your timer for tomorrow. I'm going to double check it when you're done. And then gradually that becomes, hey, go set your timers for tomorrow, which then becomes, hey, did you remember to set your timers for tomorrow? And eventually there's a level of independence that you don't even need to double check. But the use of those tools can be really helpful when it comes to time blindness and time management. Now, another strategy that we can use in the short time is time chunking. So we also want to add in a little bit of a buffer time, but what we can do here is say, okay, for the next 30 minutes, I'm going to do this activity, and when my timer goes off, I'm going to move on. Now, this is also a really great strategy as it's tied to some studies that they've done when it comes to work, how we are most effective when we work for a certain number of time and then we take another amount of time as a break. So it does tie in with some of those scientific studies they've done on work and timing. But timing and chunking these tasks. So it might be if you're looking at an essay that your child has to write for school, We are going to spend 30 minutes working on the outline. Done. Then we're going to take a break. And then maybe you set another 15 minutes to finish the outline. But chunking tasks and giving one task within a certain amount of time can be really helpful. And then narrate your own planning. Again, we always go back to that modeling. I think this will take 20 minutes, so I'm setting a timer. Now that can bleed into our long-term strategies. Modeling that over time can be really helpful. It might help for the short term. It also helps for the long term. We want to teach our kids time estimation and then reflect on that in real time. So things like, oh, you thought that would take 10 minutes. Oh, it actually took 25. Let's talk about that. And then you process through why it took 25. Did it need to take 25 or did we have a lot of distractions along the way? Or maybe our initial estimation was just low, and that's okay because we can learn from that. We want to be able to estimate the time and then reflect on that. So that takes a lot of intention, but it can be really helpful because then eventually your kid's going to learn that completing that task is going to take 25 minutes in the future. With that, building a daily schedule, and some of our younger kids benefit from a visual daily schedule, is really helpful. So we can use apps, calendars, a poster on the wall, an actual calendar on the wall. Anything that goes through our daily schedule can be really important. So especially if your children are in school. So at 8 o'clock, this happens. At 8:15, this happens. At 8:30, at 9 o'clock, whatever their day brings throughout their classes, their appointments, their activities, having a consistent routine and daily schedule can be really helpful in building that long-term understanding of time. Now, a goal idea with time management can look something like this. I can plan out my evening using a timer and complete my homework by 7:30 p.m. 3 nights a week. So you're coming up with a really specific goal that includes how you're going to remember everything, your planner, how you're going to manage your time. You're going to set a timer and a goal for completion that's going to kind of amp up that task initiation. I really like this goal specifically for those reasons. All right, we're going to dive into our next executive function skill, which is cognitive flexibility. This is the ability to shift thinking, try a new approach, or adapt to change without getting upset or shutting down. So our children with neurodivergence, specifically with autism or ADHD, they feel the safest with a predictable routine. They love their routine. Now, our individuals with ADHD benefit from routine, but sometimes they don't actually love the routine because they're seeking dopamine, they're seeking change, they're seeking those kinds of exciting new novel things that you don't always find in a predictable routine. However, they really benefit from one. Now, individuals with autism oftentimes love their predictable routines. They know what to expect and they can plan for that. They can live well within that. And so when change happens, it can be really difficult to not get upset or shut down or overwhelmed. This can trigger anxiety, overwhelm, sensory overwhelm, emotional shutdown. There's a lot that can happen when our students or our children with autism or other neurodivergence, it's not solely with autism, but that is a big one, that can be really challenging for our students and our children. So some short-term strategies, really practical. If we know that a change for our kids is going to happen, a change in routine, we need to prepare them for it. So as soon as we're able to prepare our child for that change, we need to have a calm conversation to prepare them. Hey, this came up. Something changed that was out of our control, and that's okay. But here's what that's going to mean for our schedule. Let's take some time to process that. Feel free to ask any questions you need to ask, and I want to make sure you feel comfortable moving forward. So they don't have a choice in that change, but they do have a choice in how they respond to it. And I think that's really important. Some of this emotional response and lack of cognitive flexibility when it comes to transition and change can really come from their need for control. Our children who love these routines kind of fall back on a really strong need for control. And they have that need for control because that's their comfort zone, because they're unsure of how to act or behave or what to expect if they're outside of their comfort zone. So that level of control it's kind of a defense mechanism. It protects them and it keeps them safe within that routine. So when we change that routine, it can be really challenging. But prepping our kids ahead of time and giving them another sense of control, give them something else to control, can be helpful. So we can't control the change that happened, but we can control how we respond to it. How would you like to respond to it? Here are some choices you have. Giving them that control, giving them those choices can be really helpful in the moment. Now, we also want to praise those flexible moments. Wow, you adjusted well, even though it wasn't what you expected. That's huge. Way to go. That's awesome. Another strategy we want to use is what we call same, different visuals or schedules. So this is that idea of having a daily schedule, but having it with some flexibility built in. Maybe you have some blocks of time that are open. And we can put, this is going to be the same today, or this is going to be different today. So that can be something, if you anticipate having multiple times throughout your day or throughout your week that's going to require some flexibility, factoring that into the daily schedule or the visual schedule you provide your child can be really helpful. Reviewing that ahead of time or reviewing that as soon as you know what the options are can be important so that they can prepare. Now, long-term strategies, you're going to model your own flexibility. That didn't go as planned, but I can pivot, and here's how I'm going to do that. Being that example for our kids and doing it with incredible intention and in front of our kids is so valuable for our children, whether they're neurodivergent or not. Our kids have to have this model and this example for all of these skills so that they can really grow well into them. We also use play and activities and hobbies and things that we enjoy to practice flexibility. Does the game you're playing have changing rules? Can you play what if? Kind of open up that scenario storytelling kind of game. Can you do an activity with open-ended tasks? Right? So is there a way to incorporate flexibility or slight changes within activities that our children do, games they play, time that they spend with others? Anytime we can kind of just intentionally practice that flexibility within a safe place, still within their comfort zone, it kind of stretches the rubber band of flexibility in their brain. So goal here would be, when plans change, I can take a breath and ask what's next instead of melting down. This is a little bit less specific. It's not giving, 5 times out of, or 3 times out of 5 or anything like that, but it's kind of more of an anecdotal goal of, okay, when plans change, I can take a breath and be okay. I can ask what's next instead of getting upset and melting down. I also want to point out something for these goals. I've written them all in that first person. This is not, when plans change, my mom is going to tell me that the plan changed. It's when plans change, I can take a breath. So we're working on our students a little bit of advocacy here and allowing them to take control of these goals. They have to have good buy-in. All right, we have 2 more EF skills that we're going to dive into in the last part of our podcast. The first is attention. And this one obviously can be a main challenge for individuals with ADHD. It is the ability to focus on the right thing at the right time and shift attention when needed. Now, I mentioned earlier that oftentimes individuals with ADHD will have this hyper focus. It's not a lack of attention, it's a dysregulated amount of attention. So when we say attention, we're talking about the ability to focus on the right thing at the right time and then shift attention when needed. And that does kind of tie in with that cognitive flexibility to make some of those shifts. It is so hard because we have competing stimuli, sensory sensitivities, interest-driven brains that make focus kind of this like moving target for us. There are so many things, think like fireworks going off in your brain all the time, and then your teacher's trying to teach and expecting you to pay attention to what they're teaching you. Meanwhile, you have, the noise going on outside the classroom. You have the trees blowing in the wind outside the classroom. You have the playground sitting right outside the classroom. You have the kid next to you who's got the sniffles, and your teacher wants you to pay attention. Meanwhile, in your brain, you're thinking about your dog, or you're thinking about this thing you're going to do after school because you're so excited, or you're thinking about that thing you've been learning about that you're really, really interested in. And oh, yeah, I have to listen to my teacher. So, attention regulation is different than just paying attention. It is effortful and it is draining for some brains, for some neurodivergent brains. It can be something that our students have to do with incredible intention. And they are trained to prioritize this by being in school, right? Our teachers always say, pay attention, or our parents say, pay attention. So they're very aware that this is something that they need to do. They just have an incredibly difficult time doing it. So in order to do it well, it takes a lot of strength, a lot of effort for them. And I think we underestimate how much effort it takes our children and our students with ADHD or autism or neurodivergence who struggle with this attention piece. We underestimate how much effort it takes for them. And so having maybe a little more empathy for our kids in this area can be important. Just in general, just knowing that there's 5-10 tabs open in their brain competing for attention. It's not that they don't want to focus on you. It's that they're literally in their brain. So some short-term strategies that can help. Again, using timers. So the Pomodoro method I mentioned earlier, work for 10, break for 5, work for 10, break for 5. Now this is going to be guided because we don't want to break for 5 and then expect our kids to come back for 10. They need to be prompted to come back for 10. They need to know in advance that that's the expectation. We want to reduce background distractions as much as we can. If noise is an issue, noise canceling headphones, they even have those small ones now that you can get, I think even on Amazon, that just plug in and you can hear the important stuff, but it mutes a lot of the background noise. We want clean workspaces. If we need to fidget, we can fidget. If we need to use a kickstand, we can use a kickstand. If we need to stand to work, we can stand to work. This sensory piece can be really helpful. We want to make sure that our students are comfortable. It's kind of relative to when the kid doesn't come to school, he didn't eat breakfast when he comes to school and he's hungry. He didn't sleep well the night before and he's tired. Our students are not going to perform their best if they're hungry or tired. So apply that same concept to sensory concerns with our kids, is that if they're really bothered by the noise outside the classroom, or like maybe there's construction down the street and they can hear the jackhammer, if that's really bothersome, if their pants are itchy or pulling, if their legs just want to move, it's the same impact on learning, if not worse. So we need to make educational environments available for our children so that they can move, so that they can wiggle, so that they can move their hands, they can kick their feet, they can, bounce their heels if they need to. Offering choices here can be really helpful. Would you like a kickstand on your chair? Would you like a fidget spinner? Would you like to stand? Would you like music or would you like silence? Do you want the chair or the wiggle cushion? Again, this gives our students a sense of control because they have choice in how they learn and how they physically feel. Now, diving into some long-term strategies here. This is one that's like super in the moment with that attention piece. So we want to focus on those short-term strategies right now, but building these long-term ones can be really helpful over time. Practicing metacognition, helping them increase their own self-awareness for how they learn best. Asking questions, what helps you focus best? And then listening to their answer and allowing them that control and those choices can be helpful. And that can be helpful over time because then they're going to learn how to self-advocate for what they need later on. We want to build stamina slowly. Again, start with 5 focused minutes. That sweet spot, like I said earlier. and then build it to 7, and then maybe 10. But we're not going to expect our kids right off the bat to jump to 10 minutes of focus if they're struggling with 3 or 4. Use engaging interest-based material when possible. We can't always please everybody. Not everybody's going to like Paw Patrol and Pokemon and whatever the big thing is, Mario, Minecraft. Not everybody's going to love that all the time. But if you can pull in student interest-based content in your teaching, especially for your individual with autism or ADHD, they are going to have a much easier time paying attention because it has that initial interest. You're going to pique their interest, and if you can hook them with that, it's going to be a little bit easier to keep and maintain their attention on the content you want them to learn versus what's competing in their brain. Now, a goal idea here for the student might be, I can stay focused on independent work for 15 minutes before taking a movement break, or change it to 5 or 10 or however long you need it to be for your student. Now, the last executive function skill we're going to look at today and in our executive function skills series is perseverance. It is the ability to persist through challenges, frustration, setbacks in order to complete a task. Now, I know many individuals without neurodivergence. I know many neurotypical individuals that struggle with perseverance. This is a challenge, and I think it's a challenge for our culture and our society. It's a challenge because we don't like to fail. However, perseverance is even more difficult for our students with neurodivergence because they're going to shut down quickly. Oftentimes, these students are perfectionists, or they're dysregulated, or they're used to failure. And so why persevere to not fail when all I'm going to do is fail anyway? Our kids tend to shut down, or they get overwhelmed. They struggle to start a task. So there's a lot of reasons that perseverance is difficult for our neurodivergent students. Part of that is that they have to work harder anyway. So if I were to say to a neurotypical individual, man, that sounds really, really difficult. I'm glad you can persevere, and they can. Yeah, it absolutely might be a challenge for them, but they're doing it. The challenge is in the content, and the persevering is allowing them to learn that content. But when you're factoring in neurodivergence, these learners often need to work harder anyway. They either have to work harder with their organization, they have to work harder to retain their information in their working memory, they have to work harder to start a task, and they have to rely on support more often to do so. They may have to work harder because time is frustrating, that it takes longer than they thought it was going to take. They might have the wiggles. They might struggle with the attention piece. They might need to stand up and move around more often. So there's a lot of factors. It's not just that the content is more difficult. It's all of these extraneous skills, executive function skills, that are more challenging, that often make getting to the work harder. It's the accessibility, the brain accessibility to the work that is harder. And this builds frustration, especially when they see neurotypical individuals struggling less. Why is it easy for them, but everything seems harder for me? That's a frustrating place to be, and it can often develop into shame, even guilt, especially if they don't understand that they have neurodivergence. I've mentioned it in previous podcasts, but this is a hill I'm going to die on. Our students with neurodivergence have to know that they think differently. However you approach that conversation as a parent is up to you. You might choose to say you have a disability, or you have special needs, or you think differently, and that's okay. Any one of those approaches is fine if that's what fits you and your student or your child. But our kids have to know that they think differently because they are going to have to advocate for themselves in the future. It also can kind of take a little shame away if they know that they think differently, because if I'm looking at my peers going, I don't understand how this is easy for you when it's so incredibly difficult for me. I don't understand how you are learning that math problem, when for me it feels like there's a black hole in my brain where the information goes and can never to be found again. But if I know that I have dyslexia or dyscalculia or a learning disability or ADHD or autism, if I know that about myself and I know I think differently, then that takes a lot of the shame away, or it can. I'm no longer comparing myself to my neurotypical peers. I am not a horse, I am a zebra. You can't compare a horse and a zebra very well. So that's a hill I'm going to die on. If you are a parent of a neurodivergent child, teen, older teen, adult, and you haven't had that conversation with them, I highly encourage you to do that. It's going to help them understand their own brain better so that later on they can advocate for themselves. You can build that long-term strategy so that our kids can advocate for themselves. Now, I kind of am going to digress from my little soapbox, but when it comes to perseverance, we need to use first, then prompts. First, one more math problem, then a break. They need to know what to expect. We're also going to celebrate the small wins. We've talked about this before. You stuck with that for 5 minutes longer than last time. Wow, you really gave so much effort when before you didn't. So good. I'm so proud of you. Just these baby steps, we blow them out of the water. Like every baby step is a grand big deal because it is. We want to also offer support, not solutions. So something like, I'll sit with you, but I won't do it for you, might be a good option. So when I say not solutions, think of the analogy I'm gonna give you is the wife who just needs to vent to her husband, and the husband's gonna take that and try to solve the problems. We don't want our husbands to solve every problem. Sometimes we do, that's great, but not every time is a problem-solving situation. Sometimes I just need to verbally express it. I need to get it out. I need you to hear me. So in the same way, I'm going to sit with you. I'm going to hear you. I'm not going to do it for you. Maybe I'll process it with you, but I'm here. Our individuals with neurodivergence sometimes just need to know that somebody is there and somebody understands the way that they think and the way that they learn. We also need to build frustration tolerance. We can scaffold different challenges to do that, but our individuals, our children, our students with neurodivergence are going to face frustration. They just are. So building tolerance for frustration and growing that is important over time, right? I have much thicker skin now than I did 20 years ago. I have thicker skin now than I did when I first started my career in education. The things I experienced there, my goodness, I was not prepared for. And now I look back and I'm like, oh, cakewalk, right? Because the more we experience things, the more we experience work environments, classroom environments, homework environments, frustrating experiences, our skin gets a little thicker each of those times and we build a tolerance for it. Now, the challenge here is throwing our neurodivergent students into some of these difficult challenges that might cause more of a meltdown or something like that. So if we can build frustration tolerance with what we call scaffolded challenges, so we're starting small, we're going to allow them to experience a little bit of frustration. We're going to see how they tolerate that. And then we're going to allow them to experience it again. And maybe this time they'll tolerate it a little better. And then over time, the more they experience frustration, the more desensitized they'll be to it, and then you can really continue with that perseverance. We're going to also normalize struggles and normalize setbacks. We, again, model it, show our own challenges to our students. Man, I really wanted to hit XYZ goal. I didn't. Here's why I didn't hit that goal, but now I'm setting a new goal, and I'm going to get back on that horse, and I'm going to keep going. So normalizing the fact that everybody struggles. We all have setbacks. It's not unique to individuals with neurodivergence. Every individual on this planet experiences struggle and experiences setback. It looks different sometimes for our students with neurodivergence, but if we can normalize it a little bit more, then it feels less personal and less unique to me. That can be helpful. So if I'm an individual with ADHD and I feel like everybody else gets it but me, Maybe I'm having that conversation with my student and I'm saying, hey, here's an area I really struggle with, and here's what I did to overcome it. Here's how I felt. Do you feel the same way? Is that comparable? Here's what I did, and here's what I'm really glad I did. And so having that really open, honest conversation and normalizing those things can go a long way with our students with neurodivergence. We can also do what we call practicing grit. Because as we talk about perseverance and normalizing struggle to persevere, it ties in with grit. And interestingly enough, grit is one of the number one indicators of success in life. It's been studied, right? Like, is it access to financial resources? Is it education? Is it who you're married to or your social circle? And none of those things impact the outcome of your life and your success in life like grit, which is fascinating to me. And that tells me that if we have grit, then we are unstoppable. So whether you're neurotypical or neurodivergent, if you have grit, you can make it and you can get to where you want to go. Now, some fun ways to practice grit, we can do it in fun, playful ways. Puzzles, games, Legos, problem-solving activities, anything like that. If we give up immediately when we hit a problem, then we don't have grit yet. We don't have perseverance yet. So let's grow that over time. It's building that frustration tolerance over time. We want to build that grit in our kids. So goal idea here might be, I can keep working for 10 minutes even when the task feels hard. And I can do this maybe 3 out of 5 days or 4 out of 5 days. But the ability to make progress and to keep moving forward even when it feels hard. Now, these 5 executive function skills we've talked about in this podcast, task initiation, time management, cognitive flexibility, attention, and perseverance, they often develop unevenly and slowly over the course of time. And that actually applies to all of the executive function skills, not just the ones we talked about today. They often develop unevenly and slowly over the course of a long period of time. It's why we're looking at the short-term immediate strategies and those long-term strategies, because even though they develop unevenly and slowly, we still want to develop independence with our children within these skill set. But for neurodivergent individuals, it is important to remember that support and consistency will win in the long run. There have been so many times I've said to myself, I can't believe I doubted her after my daughter has accomplished something in her own time. We're currently working on swimming, and the challenge right now is fear over going underwater. And yet I look at her and I know she's going to get there because I've seen her overcome sensory challenges and speech challenges and frustration and fear and anxiety over the course of time. And I've seen her do it over and over and over again. So now I look at her going, oh, I know she's going to do it. And we're going to try different strategies to get her there. Maybe it's going to mean I jump in the pool with her. I don't know, but I know she's going to get there. And I'm going to go, I can't believe I doubted her. So support and consistency in the long run will really win with our students as we develop these executive function skills. Growth takes time, and that is true whether you are neurotypical or neurodivergent. When we're learning new skills, growth takes time, and we need to take the extra time to celebrate the effort and the baby steps, not the perfection. So an idea for moving forward might be to just choose one skill to focus on this week. Keep it simple, keep it consistent. Do you want to work on task initiation or emotional regulation or attention? Pick one. Keep it simple, keep it consistent. You are doing meaningful work. Whether you are a parent, a grandparent, a family friend, an aunt and uncle, an educator, a tutor, if you have a relationship with somebody that's neurodivergent, you are doing meaningful work. Your support creates new pathways in the brain for independence and confidence, and that might take time, but it is worth it. As we wrap up, I want to encourage you to stay tuned for future topics and future podcasts. We might be wrapping up our series on executive function skills, and I hope you share this with somebody who needs the reminder that executive function growth is possible. But we're looking forward to upcoming episodes where we're going to tackle other questions surrounding neurodiversity. I plan to do episodes around specific forms of neurodiversity such as autism, ADHD, dyslexia, and other learning disabilities. If you have a topic, if you have a question, please let me know. You can email me, you can post it on our Facebook post or send me a message. Any way to get in touch with me, let us know your questions or a topic request for a potential podcast. We'd be happy to consider it. We'll also spend some time discussing IEPs and the important details that parents and educators need to know about the individual education plans that their children are supposed to benefit from. Next, I have plans to interview some pretty fantastic experts in their field as we start to take a look at the process of getting diagnoses and support for your children. Sometimes it can be hard to know where to start, and oftentimes we don't know what we don't know until we ask. So we want to help you put the pieces of the puzzle together, so be on the lookout for future episodes. In addition, this summer we're launching our very own Orton Gillingham multisensory-based virtual reading subscription program. That is a mouthful, but we're so excited to be able to present this to you as either a subscription or a full curriculum. So if you're a tutor, if you're a parent, and you're looking for support for your dyslexic student or child, please reach out and get on the wait list for our very own Orton Gillingham Success Academy reading program. Now, please remember, as a parent, family member, or educator of neurodivergent individuals, you are not alone. We are here and we are building a community of support. And we thank you for listening to this podcast. And remember that Erin Lechterhand Coaching is a mission and vision-driven small business designed to support you. As a team, we provide virtual intervention and education to break down barriers and create access to research-based tools that empower neurodivergent individuals. By addressing challenges specific to neurodiversity, our sessions foster growth, resilience, and self-confidence, equipping students and adults with the skills they need to thrive. We envision a world where neurodivergent individuals are empowered to embrace their unique strengths, knowing they are created on and for a purpose. Through innovative virtual interventions, we strive to build a future where every learner feels valued, capable, and confident, all while fostering a shared joy in the journey of growth, discovery, and success.